Hello everyone, I'm Meena Kandasamy. I'm a novelist and today I will be reading for the Ballet Festival from my latest novel, Exquisite Cadavers. And this is a novel which explores the theme of storytelling, and it's also laid out on the page in a slightly what can be called experimental way. So I'm going to put the story in the margins is the story of the writer, the story of my influences, and the story that's the main text is the story of the couple in the novel. So one is fiction and the other is non-fiction. I'm going to read a chapter called See Hijabi Glory Couscous, and it comes bang in the middle of the novel. And so I will be following the pattern of, reading the marginalia first, where the author's life is written about, and then I will give the stage to the fictional characters about whom I'm reading, which is Maya, mixed race British woman, and her husband Karim, who is a Tunisian filmmaker. So the margins, of course, is my life. So to look away is easy, to look elsewhere is escapism. And I write about here as in London, here as in home, because I'm an immigrant. I want to make this land my own. I want to integrate and assimilate and mingle and merge and dissolve until I disappear. If it feels hardcore, it is. Yadum ure yavarum kelir. Another part of me rallies against this treachery, against this quick abandoning of the motherland, against this craving to be soluble in another culture. Why don't I write India? I chide myself, catalogue the horrors which visited on her women, humiliated, exploited, raped, beaten, murdered, her Dalits, ostracized, lynched, jailed, tortured, stripped naked, murdered en masse. Her Muslims, all of the above, plus being called terrorists, plus being killed on the suspicion of having eaten beef. Her Christians, some of the above, plus nuns being raped and priests being burnt to death and churches being vandalized. Her Adivasis, criminalized, deprived of livelihoods, imprisoned, their lands grabbed, military presence heaped around their homes. Schools built in garrison style to house the encroaching militaries, the tombstones of the dead thrown into bodies of water, children assaulted, the men rounded up and punished for speaking out, women activists interrogated and tortured by having stones put into their vaginas. Her non-Indians, Kashmiris, Manipuris, upon whom she bestows the curse of Indiandom and an occupying army and detention centers and torture camps. Her gays, her lesbians, her children, her transgendered, her Tamils, her migrants, her refugees, her tourists, her farmers, her fisher people, her prisoners, her dissenters, her writers, her cultural activists, her independent filmmakers, her journalists, her disabled, her civil society, her poor, her dying, her old, her young, her unemployed. One book will not be enough. One storyline cannot hold all those strands together. Madras, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. The news I read about, the land I left behind, the old lover I tactfully avoid thinking about. The bitch friend who betrayed my secrets, thunderous rain my sleeps long for, the streets where I transport myself when I feel lost, the crowded, cacophonous, never-ending Marina Beach, the tiny lanes of Triplicane, poverty and squalor, ambition and hatred, where I spent the first 5 years of my life. The forest where I spend my next 20, with its foxes and its deer, with its hares and its monkeys, with its poisonous snake and its Brahmins. The IIT where my mother fought a fierce and bitter battle for 2 decades, the Madras University where both my parents finished their PhDs. The many places where I secretly met the man who occupied my dreams, the city that would not tolerate such transgressions, the city that could give one life, give one death, give one misery, give one the marching orders, the city that was a cruel village, a city of the meanest gossip, the city that would not let me grow, a city to which I cannot return, the city that pretended to be home as long as my parents lived there, the city of crows, their cawing, unstilled, unsilenced, clamoring, seizing me in every moment of my personal dread. London is where I spent 5 days in labor. London is where I birthed a new life, became a mother. If this does not make a place home, what does, I wonder? Try telling this to someone who is not a writer, someone who works overtime and works weekends. I want to leave this city because I do not feel confident enough to write about life here. I feel irrelevant. I have rehearsed this line many times. It's the most vulgarly selfish thought to have crossed my mind. Self-flagellation becomes the default mode of feeling. I'm Marxist. My concerns and my solidarity align with the oppressed and the exploited. And yet, creating art under capitalism, I sit here playing with form, with format, with fonts. All of my frivolous, fanciful play is the class struggle taking a make-up break. Such indulgence, such decadence when my country of birth has been taken over by Hindu fascists baying for blood, when the country of my second life is on a suicidal mission, A for austerity, B for Brexit. Rent in London is that bitch. Every month on the 17th, we have a long discussion about living here that living here is increasingly untenable. We need to leave, I tell him. We cannot carry on like this. Yes, he agrees. If we are going back to India, it has to be done before our little one starts school. It would be cruel to uproot him once he has his own routine, his set of friends, I reason. You make India sound like destiny, Cedric says, like an ultimatum. I don't say anything to defend myself. Being in love means letting a remark like that slip unnoticed. There are other things that demand our urgent attention anyway. With all of our kadal and konjal and kenjal and kinder, with all of our romantic display of genuine internationalism, we are now expecting our second child. First place, then time, the new frontier of contention in our couple. Not finding time to do the work that pays the bills, keeping ourselves afloat, replying to emails, cooking meals at home, for jobs, leaving the washed clothes out to dry. Taking a shower every day, calling home, taking pictures or writing weekly diary entries about our son who is growing up too quickly. One day he's a breastfeeding infant, the next day he's ready to go to play school. We check out 3 nurseries in the neighborhood. There's one just round the corner from our house, in a building straight out of a picture book, green gables and all that. They show us the different rooms, the dressing room, the sleeping room, the construction room, the messy room. Our toddler does not want to leave what he has found. Cedric quizzes them on all the little particulars. I just hope they will be nice to our son, not scar him for life, not break his spirit. I'm prone to such philosophical ruminations. Back home, we discuss the many positives and negatives. Did you know that nurseries run the Prevent program? What's that? To spot radicalization, to stop them becoming terrorists. At that age, yeah, he asks, pointing to a toddler blissfully asleep in his pram. Yes, at their age. And how will they find out if this little one is going to become a terrorist? The symptoms are displayed on a notice board. Child isolates himself, talks a lot as if from a scripted speech, that sort of thing. He's already a terrorist, he says. Good luck with that. And now we're going to Karim, who is the filmmaker from Tunisia. Hopes soar, then plunge like the gnawing noises of his childhood sea at sundown. It is to this familiar terrain that Karim retreats, a place where meanings exist without the words to call them by, a place that is preserved, unchanged, unchanging in the amber of his imagination. In the denuded backdrop, his marriage resembles a creaky boat hauled to the land for paint, repair, renaming. Everything will be fine one day, someday soon. A little work is all that's required. His wife's fresh little quarrels are unnecessary annoyances. He's aware of their grating presence like stray fronds, noisily dragging themselves along the coast, riding the remnants of wind, unmindful of the wet decay. Crude as it comes across for the purposes of not having to engage with the tumultuous marriage situation, Karim lets himself be submerged in his studies. Learning turns out to be disappointing, leaves him lost, bereft of even the language of heartbreak to mourn its many betrayals. It starts innocently. At film school, Karim is told that a project embracing and interrogating his identity is encouraged. He hears this repeatedly as guidance, as reassurance. Peace be upon those advice peddlers. As motivation, as art statement, as part of their institutional commitment and mission to include a whole host of diverse voices. Peace be upon them indeed. What he also hears are their unsaid words. You're here in London. honor scholarship. We have covered your tuition. We expect you to listen to us. The bargain barter system is firmly entrenched. A university is not any less transactional than the 20 hours a week he spends taking orders at a Turkish restaurant. In the eyes of the academy, not belonging to the white universal limits the worlds to which a Karim can bear credible witness. To be an Arab means to be chained to a pre-tailored word cloud that goes little beyond desert storms and terrorists, oils and bombs, camels and Bedouins, paradise and Salafis. If he could step inside their minds to play a cartographer, he would encounter the signposted landmarks for Tunisia, sea, hijabi, glory, couscous. And even those signposts come with conditional fine print, only so far, no further. The Mediterranean Sea is trouble, refugees, drownings, the rise of the far right. What is Europe? Why don't these people go to Rwanda? In another time, it was Mussolini versus the Allied troops. Now, Swiss massacre of British terrorists, blanket cancellation of Thomas Cook package holidays, FCO warnings, Daily Mail stories of eyewitnesses. Tourism meets terrorism is a Hollywood genre, not an aspirational standard for students in scholarship. Karim's proposal to follow the footsteps of John Akamfroy in using archival footage of a World War II film called Tunisian Victory alongside news clippings of ISIS attacks is immediately shut down. His other painstakingly researched suggestion to replicate Walid Raad's fictional archives of Lebanon for the 5 decades of brutal dictatorship in Tunisia meets the same fate, as does his suggestion to travel to the poorest suburbs of his country, Duarhishe, Kazirin, et Daman, from where ISIS has had its highest number of recruits. No, 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 the advisory committee says. We have to discourage you in the interest of your own safety. His well-wishers in the boat advise him against pursuing this dream further, concern laced with a warning. We have the prevent program here. We're required to remain vigilant about this sort of thing. The institution is committed to the government's counter-terrorism policy. This is part of the student visa requirement. This would require security clearance from the Ministry of Defense. Such a morbid interest in extremism itself is a giveaway, a sign of being attracted to radicalism. We don't need trouble at our doorsteps. To stay political is a preoccupation of the privileged. An immigrant can be sad, hopeless, embittered, lost, or angry, never articulate. The frustration piles up. As the deadline looms closer, his options become more limited. A gesture of conciliation is put forward. Could you do a documentary on women who wear the hijab? You could compare the women here who wear it and the women in Paris where you've spent some years. He sees that the radical idea is merely bemused tolerance, another opportunity for the British to pride themselves on being better than the French. Karim has mixed feelings about the wheel, in fact, has similar feelings about wearing socks and sandals. As he imagines himself making this documentary, he fears his father. He hears father lazing on the terrace of a coffee shop, holding forth on what the chador meant, a screen not a veil, and how his mysticism was intriguing and unwelcome to both the secularists and the Islamists. His father speaking in a smoker's halting voice meant for public consumption, a voice that never broke, never rose, never fell. Could he tell the story of his land through the story of the hijab? The headscarf was banned in 1981, this the year of his birth, from schools and government buildings. It was the secularism of dictators, the secularism that France dipped its baguettes in. The headscarf was seen as a foreign intrusion, an Islamic imposition on a Berber people, something which came uninvited into their country, something which had no right to remain. In the post-independence era, it was seen as oppressive, one of the last vestiges of patriarchy. In the worst excesses of Ben Ali's regime, police harassed the few women who dared to wear headscarves. Karim remembers reading op-eds saying the Arabian Barbie, a hijab-wearing doll called Fula, was spreading sectarianism. The state set about confiscating them. After the revolution, when the people had ousted a dictator, they set about reclaiming their own space. The Islamic right exploited this, manipulating this revival and the widespread impoverishment for their own ends. Years later, his motherland, which once went into a frenzy against headscarf-wearing dolls, would provide the highest number of foreign fighters for the dreaded. He discusses the complicated baggage of his project with Maya. his wife, and she has a singularly different perspective. Oh, this hijab thing is another excuse for you to go and chat up girls, isn't it? Karim laughs at this just jealous remark, but he is not offended. Her jealousy does not feel sorry for itself, and he wishes he could borrow its confident, uninhibited core so that he can get heard at film school. Thank you.